time of pandemic, many of us are quarantined inside of our houses, and it seems like we don't have clear answers to anything anymore. Our basic routines, or what we consider normal, have all been disrupted, and everything has been turned upside down for us. This newfound uncertainty is creating an unprecedented amount of unrest, worry, and anxiety for many of us. I am so excited because today's episode, I have Dr. Sylisa Lambert-Woodard with me. I am such a fan of yours, Dr. Lambert-Woodard, and I am so happy that you're here and you can offer us just a few simple tips to help us learn how to house a healthy soul during these times of great stress, because we don't talk about that often. Dr. Lambert-Woodard is the CEO of the Alliance Therapy Center in Virginia, which provides a variety of therapeutic and mental health services. And also, she's a dual CEO. She's also the CEO of a nonprofit organization called Pathway Homes, which provides housing and support services to adults with severe mental illness. So she's in a very qualified position to talk to us about this today. So welcome, Dr. Lambert-Woodard. It's so great to have you today.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you so very much for inviting me. And you're absolutely right. The coronavirus is everywhere on the news, and everyone's talking about it. The statistics and status of the outbreaks are changing rapidly, and there's uncertainty around the virus. We've given an identity to the word quarantine, right, and social distancing. And we've learned these new concepts like flattening the curve and contact tracing.
Our new vocabulary, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And not to be undone, of course, we've declared a state of emergency. That does not help to contain public fear. And so our brains are quickly trained that we are not in control. But the one thing we all have in common is that we have never experienced a pandemic. So we're all in a bit of a foreign land. This pandemic crisis can be traumatizing, both for those who are directly exposed, those who become ill, have loved ones who become ill or die, and for those individuals who have lost their jobs, or those indirectly exposed, right, to the consequences of the pandemic, like those who are witnessing their community in chaos and disruption to their daily lives. Upheaval of a widespread health crisis can really evoke a great deal of stress. And as a result, we find ourselves in a fight or flight response, right? That stress response that we know so much about. And we know it's triggered by a release of hormones that's either prompting us to stay and fight or run away. And without you even telling it what to do, your body is assessing what's going on every day and determining your options. But living in a prolonged state of high alert and stress can be really detrimental to your physical and your mental health. During the stress response, your body's trying to prioritize. So anything that it doesn't really need for immediate survival is placed on the back burner. And this means that your digestion, your reproductive and growth hormone production, your tissue repair, are all temporarily halted. And instead, your body is using all of its energy on the most critical priority, which is to figure out how to fight something that is largely an invisible threat and survive.
It's funny. We always talk about having stress in our lives and how much stress we have and how much stress we have. Well, this is an unprecedented level of stress that I don't think any of us have ever experienced, on top of the ordinary stress that we think we have in our lives. So let me ask you, Dr. Lambert-Woodard, what do you think are some ways that we can go about managing this stress? Because we know the long-term impact that stress can have on our bodies and on our health overall. So we have that to worry about on top of the virus.
That's true. That's true. Well, let's talk a little bit about the difference between worry and anxiety, first of all. We all worry. Worry is considered a normative psychological state, but anxiety really is not. And we tend to experience worry in our heads, but we really experience anxiety in our bodies. It's more visceral, right? So it's normal to worry about how the pandemic might impact you. Maybe you can, identify what you can do, and you can accept the things you can't change and that you have no control over. But if you begin to experience uncontrollable worry that occurs consistently, for extended periods of time, like 6 months or more, and you have those signs, those physical signs of fatigue or muscle aches, restlessness, difficulty sleeping, or irritability, then you may be experiencing anxiety, and you may want to consult with a mental health professional. In the midst of this pandemic, if your stress level is unacceptable, I would say that you can simply say to yourself, stop, and take a deep breath. And you know that deep breathing reduces stress and anxiety. There is a moment of choice before we react to stress. And taking a deep breath gives us that moment, because most of us are really unaware until we breathe that we have a moment, because we get caught into our own habitual patterns of reaction. So it's at this moment that we have a chance to challenge our thoughts. Our thoughts are not facts necessarily.
Right.
Good news is that thoughts always precede those feelings and behaviors. So there are many different types of treatments for anxiety, but I would say that there are two in particular that I highly recommend and are recommended broadly. One is, of course, mindfulness, and you may obviously be aware of this. It's that practice of really focusing in on one thing in the moment with each breath that you take. And the other recommendation is to really be able to look at cognitive behavioral therapy, which really teaches us to read our emotions and understand how distorted perceptions and thoughts contribute to the painful feelings that we have. If you have further interest in these recommendations, there are many mindful apps. Many of them are free. You can download, and there are many reputable cognitive behavioral therapists called CBT therapists who can assist you. There's 1 in 5 individuals in the United States suffer from anxiety. It's the most commonly diagnosed mental health condition in the US. So if you'd like to take a look at a site and look deeper into this, I highly recommend that you take a look at SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They have a national hotline, and I have their number, which is 1-800-662-HELP. And they could help you in terms of referrals and provide you with some ways of looking a little bit more deeply into if you're in a healthy state.
That's terrific information. Thank you for offering that, because I think we don't talk about some of these things, and people just try to deal with it on their own. And
Absolutely.
And thank you for offering what's available out there, because I think people don't even know where to look first. So thanks for that. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you while I have you here is this whole concept of social distancing. I mean, we're all, really what we're doing is we're physically distanced, right? But we're away from everyone. We can't really be with our loved ones, and we're staying at home a lot. Do you have any thoughts about what's important for us to remember during this time of being away from everyone and also being homebound?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have through our telework and homebound state is what you mentioned earlier is tending and potentially losing our souls in this whole process. And I have to say, when I think about souls, I think about our souls really being the fabric that represents us. It's where our feelings and our emotions rest. And when you talk about housing, that's right up my alley. So, as you mentioned, over the years, I've really been fortunate to provide permanent supportive housing, which is an evidence-based best practice approach to helping individuals move into recovery. And the focus that I've had over the last 30 years or more, has been working with individuals with serious mental illness. And so evidence supports that, housing is actually the most significant social determinant of health. So housing really is prescription. So a lot of what I talk about stems from housing, and it's somewhat ironic because we're homebound. So I actually have come up with these kind of 3 basic tenets to housing. I think that's kind of witty. and really in housing a healthy soul during this pandemic. So I would love for you to do this exercise with me. It's very brief, and
Okay.
anyone who's listening, I'm going to ask them to do it with me as well. It's pretty easy. So I would like for you to close your eyes for a minute, and I'd like for you to think about what your forever home looks like. Just close your eyes and visualize your forever home. Awesome. Okay, you can open your eyes. So no matter what you visualized, you'd probably agree that you would need to identify this forever home in your perfect location, because it's all about real estate, right? Location, location, location. And then the second tenet is that you know, in order to have a forever home, you want to be able to reside in it for the rest of your life. You want to have a solid foundation. And the third tenet is really around the investment, because you really have to think about making the investment to support the type of home that you want to have forever. So no matter what you visualize, that location, foundation, and investment, these are key tenets in being able to have a healthy soul. And I want to be able to kind of operationalize those for you. So if you can bear with me, I want you to think about location. And it's really locating your inner strength, identifying your higher power so that it can give you a sense of purpose in your life. That gives you confidence that there's something greater than you that has control over this current pandemic. You know, in many of the 12-step programs, AA and others, they oftentimes focus on a higher power, and they say that it can be anything that a member believes is, again, that word adequate, right? So for me, it's God. For others, it may be Buddha or nature or consciousness, I don't know, existential freedom. It can even be the 12-step program, to be quite honest with you. But it's this approach to thinking about life that can strengthen your mental health and to really lead to a sense of joy in your life. So location's the first one. And the second one that I mentioned is foundation. It's important to build a foundation of self-care during these times, to stay connected with people, even in these times that may necessitate that we quarantine or have that social distancing that you talked about. There's creative ways to be able to remain connected to others. And thank heavens we have technology. It's a great resource when the physical proximity is not necessarily an option. And when all else fails, remember the basics. Over the last few weeks, I've done a lot of work with a number of my clients on Zoom and other virtual portals. And I'd like to say, it's important for you to take care of yourself. I oftentimes say to those I serve, take a bath. Okay. Get up and take a bath. Yeah. Don't neglect yourself. It sounds very simple. You know, make sure you get enough sleep, eat right, make sure you have the proper nutrition. There's rainbow diets and wonderful ways to put good things in your body so good things come out, and exercise. Because we know that research really does demonstrate that these basic daily tasks support our brain's activity and capacity to cope and to regulate stress. These are all very, very important. It helps to decrease our anxiety symptoms, and really it helps us to be able to process more fluidly. And then the other piece is really to remain educated by reliable sources. Although staying informed is important, it's also important for you to minimize your exposure to our media. Maybe 15, 30 minutes a day is more than sufficient, because, you know, overexposure during a pandemic really can create flooding, and that contributes to stress and trauma. And exposure to trauma-filled media really has links with increased nature of what's called vicarious traumatization, right? And trauma stress symptoms. And then the last one really is this third tenet for housing your soul, is to make a solid investment in yourself. Answer your call to greatness, right? Trials are meant to strengthen us, not to weaken our spirit and soul. So seize the day. Make sure that if you're working from home, that, you know, if you are working from home, I challenge you, have you thought about taking any time off? Have you thought about maybe reading any books or blogs or investing in your future? never stop learning. Take out a personal life insurance policy that pays you back. Create some multiple streams of income. Know your limits and respect them. Make sure that you are tending to prayer or meditation, and ask for help when you need it.
Wow. I'm just struck by some of the things that you just said, because many of us have heard all of this, right? And we hear, all right, so, take a bath or meditate. But I think the way you're framing this, Dr. Lambert-Woodard, is there's a place to go inward, and we have that place inside of us at our disposal all of the time. And yet all of those things are ways in which we can enable ourselves to go inside and spend that time inside, because that's where the strength comes from. I mean, I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. I mean, I feel like I've gained so much out of this. And I would ask you, just before we go, I know I asked you several questions, but are there any other parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us that you think would be helpful to us all during this time?
Well, I would say, we're all mortal beings, right? And that this pandemic has perhaps come at a point in our lives developmentally where it's premature for us to be thinking about our mortality. But what it has done, I think, and what I challenge each person to do, is to think about their life, to focus on living, because you only have one life. And it's important for you to simply be kind and compassionate to yourself, be mindful. Focus on the here and now. We really are as dependent on tomorrow as each moment of today, and so that really focus daily is so important for us all. What makes a difference in your life that you lead is how you embrace it. And you have the choice in terms of how you to pursue each moment of each day. So I challenge each person to be able to see this as an opportunity and to be able to move through this and to know that this too shall pass.
Wise words of wisdom. This too shall pass. That's something I always say. I know my husband always says his grandmother used to say that. And, sometimes grandmothers have the best wisdom. I appreciate so much you being here today. Thank you very much, and stay safe.
Absolutely. Thank you, Janet. Yeah.